anybody? So we have some poems tonight. From me, from Satori. I know Nikki wants to read a poem.
I can read mine. I've got it here. If you guys are cool with that. I don't know how it will come across, but I will read it for you now. It's called Victorian Dream, and it was a dream that I had. Languid, torn trails of tears, and thread hanging from my dress. Patchwork squares of desperation, snares, soaked deep inside the pools of my muddy fantasy.
This vast, unexplored area covers more than 600 square miles. Those who went beyond don't return.
Dragging me to the shelter, hopes abound with confusion. My door is stark, naked and bare, like the winds of time. Nothing. There is a chiming that exists in the air, carried through like a swan song. I am like a church bell. No one is here, rendered mute and stone cold. Wearily travelling, piercing pain, stumbling across the cobbled mess, I gaze at my daggles, swollen and red. The morgues consume me, so I return, empty. The skillamink that I have become possesses me. Through the dirty town, and then they look upon my person. Light after light after light after light, carousels of darkness, plentiful and fast, enshroud my vision. Complete shutter reels of disbelief. Snap, snap, snap. My life's photograph. The strife, the pain. Where are my dreams? Where do they live? Inside the soft snow, melting terrain of my existence. The thorns embedded along the path of time wrap me up and force me to dance. Transform to ribbon and kiss my skin. Mermaids whisper. I fall inside the clock and go deep inside. For now, I merge with the pendulum. I am a rock that knows no bounds.
Sweet. Nice. Thanks for reading. That was great.
Thank you. It was a bit... I'm not really used to reading anything poetical.
I think you did a great job.
Thank you.
Yeah. And it was interesting to hear you read, because I read this earlier today. You posted it.
Mm-hmm.
And it has such a gorgeous, melancholic vibe to it. You know?
It was a weird... the dream, when I woke up from the dream, made me feel weird and melancholic. So when I wrote it, I had that feeling of being melancholic. So it was a really depressing dream, actually, but not in a sort of despairing sense of depression. It was more of a kind of surrendering depression, if that makes sense. That's how the dream made me feel when I woke up. It was like a really one of those really lucid dreams that you have. And I just tried to sort of put what my visual experience was of the dream into words. And I actually went online and I looked up different things that, you know, I remember in the dream I was looking at my hands and they were all red and sore, like I poured acid over them or something. This is how my hands looked in the dream. And I stumbled across this site and it was Victorian slang words. And this word came up that I've never heard of called daddles. That was the word, which is apparently a slang word for boring-looking hands. So that's where that line came from, daddles, swollen and red. So I was just sort of, that's how I kind of formed the poem. That's how I wrote it. But it was quite a melancholy dream that I had. So if it came across like that, I was probably feeling it a little bit, to be honest, when I was reading it.
So word came in your dream that like described the way your hands were, but you didn't know the word before? Is that what happened? That's amazing. That's, if I understood that correctly.
You have some other of these kind of very rare words like morbs, which you told me was a slang for a feeling of a Victorian slang term for feeling melancholy.
It is. So a severe case of the morbs is feeling morbid, feeling that morbid state. That's where it comes from. The morbs, that is a Victorian slang for feeling sad, a sort of a deep feeling of sadness, melancholy. So yeah, I added that into the poem as well because that was how I felt when I was sort of drudging through this mud. You know, I could see the bottom of my dress, and I was obviously in a poor scenario because I was drudging through all this mud, and I could see all the sort of end of my dress trailing through all this mud, and it was kind of like a real sort of difficult process to get through this mud, sort of drudging through it, going back to my house. I think I was traveling back to my house in the dream, and my dress looked a bit like it was made of patchwork. It sort of had like, it looked like bits of fabric stitched together. So a huge part of the dream was me visualizing my feet walking through this mud and then looking at my hands. In fact, I actually think I looked at my hands about 3 times in the dream. I'd sort of walk through this mud, it sort of went on forever, and then I'd look at my hands again. And so that was a big thing in this dream, which is why I made a kind of a line of it in the poem.
But looking at your hands is a shamanic technique for inducing lucid dreaming and even doing
Isn't
other
that weird? It was a lucid dream. It was a lucid dream, and I kept looking at my hands over and over again in the dream.
And you know,
I didn't know that.
A lot of times what I notice is that dreams a lot of times are like trying to teach you something. So there was something about bringing awareness into that data pack of whatever it was, and it's interesting to solidify that in a poem. In a lot of ways, earlier today in the group, there was this great picture of this notebook, and I guess it's from a book or whatever, and they have quotes about poems, and in it's kind of talking about how there's like no language for these things that we're trying to talk about, and that poems are attempt to do that. And I think this is the process that you're going through and doing.
Yeah, it was reading this poem, I knew that the title said it was a dream, but I still took it as a poem first and not just a dream recall. And I find with even just seeing it as a poem, it does have such a dreamlike feeling to it that you take everything as factual, even as the whole poem transforms, and very quickly transforms, especially towards the end, where it's a photograph, and then you're asking, where are my dreams? Where do they live? And they're inside this soft snow that you hadn't, before it was mud, and now it's snow, and it's melting the terrain of existence. And then you turn to these thorns embedded along the path of time, which wrap me up and force me to dance. And it's like these like left field associations that I think is the most dreamlike. Like Mermaid's Whisper, I fall inside the clock. It's such a surreal idea, such a surreal phrase. Where does this mermaid come from? And I think that's very that's very true to what dreams feel like, for sure. And I know you've posted my dream group, and I swear the dreams I've read of yours feel like it's the most that I felt like I'm dreaming myself, in terms of how the logic goes.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing about the mermaid is in that dream, towards the end, when I got to my front door in the dream, so in this Victorian dream, I was drudging through this mud, and then I eventually got to this door. Somebody opened the door, but I never actually, I looked up their body, and it was a woman because it was a dress. And then I never got to the head, and then it was kind of like a shutter type, old-fashioned camera. It just sort of closed off, and then I could hear this kind of gentle sort of siren-y type voices whispering, but not in a scary way. It was kind of like it was like I'd left that existence, I'd left that life, and I could hear and I remember a book about mermaids. I can't remember what the title of the book was, which is annoying, but my mum used to read me when I was a kid, and it was all about how they used to sing and do all this. It was kind of like written in a format that children would understand, but they used to do the singing, and they used to make everything grow with the singing. They used to make trees grow and all this stuff. I wish I could remember the name of the book, but as a child, when my mum used to read that book, it used to give me a lot of comfort, because I used to think, oh God, these mermaids sing and then they make everything nice and okay. So of course, in my dream, this kind of feminine entity or entities of singing, I interpreted that as these mermaids that in the story of the book that my mum read me. So it was kind of, that's where that line came from. That was my interpretation of these voices that were really beautiful and sort of healing and gentle in the dream. But this happened after the sort of the blackout of me, this door opening. I saw this person, and then it was kind of like there's nothing left after that, and I kind of left that reality. So it was a really bizarre dream, and it was almost like that was my life, and then I left that reality, and then I could hear this whispering, which I interpreted as like the mermaids in the book.
Wow.
So that's kind of where that came from.
Cool. It's like a iceberg of your subconscious, all these hidden connections, That's great. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for reading.